trust my instincts. I did it when writing. When I'm sitting down, I'm alone, and I don't spend a lot of time questioning my own instincts. If I think this is a bad scene, it is, and I just redo it. Or
I'd like to welcome to the show Tom Schulman. How you doing, Tom?
I'm very good, Alex. Nice to meet you.
A pleasure to meet you as well, my friend. First of all, I want to thank you for being such an instrumental part of my youth growing up in the 90s.
I hope you like the results, but yeah.
No, obviously did Poet Society, but What About Bob? Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So many great films from that. What About Bob is one of my favorite insanities. I wish that I always, anytime I talk about Hollywood and the way it used to be, I always use What About Bob as an example. I'm like, they wouldn't make that movie today. Studios wouldn't make a What About Bob, but my God, isn't it an amazing thing that at least it existed at that point? But I wish they would make these kind of smaller films. They used to make the 10 or 15 films and 2 or 3 tent poles and like kind of throw them all out, and 1 or 2 would take care of everybody. But now it's just like,
They don't have that love of movies anymore, as executives. It's all bottom line.
It's all IP, it's all superheroes. But, I think that Spielberg said it best. I think just like the Western, it will play itself out, the superhero genre, eventually.
It's hard. It's been around for a long time, but I think he's right. I mean, certainly, I would never argue with Steven Spielberg about that.
Well, obviously you can't, because if not, there's things that happen. Lightning comes down. It's crazy.
Our screens both go black.
Our screens go black. Accounts just drain of money. Like, what happened? Like,
right, exactly. It's just suddenly, but
exactly. That was Steven right there that did that.
I didn't touch my screen. Yeah,
So, Tom, so my first question to you is, how and why in God's green earth did you get into this insanity that is the film industry?
Boy, that's a good question. I grew up in the South. I grew up in Nashville. I later found out that the South was kind of a dumping ground for horror movies, AIP, American International Pictures, and all those companies. Those movies didn't perform outside of the South. So I grew up, every Saturday going downtown with my friends on a bus and going to 2 or 3 really lousy horror films, and really, I liked movies, but, that was just kind of a junk form of entertainment. But then in college, they had a film society, and they started bringing really interesting movies in, things from Kurosawa and Fellini and Bergman and, just stuff that I had no idea movies could do. And I just was fascinated by that. And senior year in college, I had a chance to either write a term paper about one of the novels we were reading, or make a short film. So, of course, everybody in the class made a short film. I made a little Super 8 film, and it's terrible, but just fell in love with the process and thought, this is what I want to do.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that when you were coming up, it wasn't a cool thing to be a director. It wasn't even in the zeitgeist. It wasn't a thing that it was even possible. Honestly, there was very few people doing it, compared to today, where, I remember growing up and the only behind the scenes I saw was a Star Wars documentary and a Raiders of the Lost Ark documentary. And that was, and whatever books I could find at the library. There was no other information about the filmmaking process.
That's right. Yeah.
So that you jumped in and like, I think I'm going to give this a go is amazing.
Crazy. In hindsight, so stupid, but
Well, that's isn't it amazing though, the delusion of the filmmaker and the screenwriter is it's his or her best friend and worst enemy at the same time, because you need delusion to do what we do.
You do. It's so true.
But at a certain point, the delusion becomes a handicap when you're like, well, I'm the greatest, or I'm going to see you at the Oscars, or Steven Spielberg's going to produce my next film. This insanity starts to come in.
The megalomania comes with it, for sure. The same little power you have in your world of creating it on the script page, or, if you're directing on the set, suddenly you're just, I have a friend, a director, and he says after he gets through shooting a movie, he finds himself people running into him on the streets of New York. And it's because on the set, when you walk from the monitor to the to the actor. Everybody moves out of the way, but after the movie, nobody's moving. They don't know who you
yeah.
are.
You mean I have to get my own coffee?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I don't.
Right.
What are we, savages?
Yeah. Friend says he just loves to put his hand out and a Diet Coke comes in. Just it's without
it is a strange carny kind of lifestyle, isn't it? I always say we're carny folk. We're carnival folk because we ran away with the circus essentially to do what we do as filmmakers, as screenwriters at any level, whether it be Oscar winner or just be working filmmakers. It's the circus. It really, really is.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. And you just hope you don't end up in the, within the deformed area of the,
where all the freaks, and let's just say we don't want to end up in a Guillermo del Toro carnival.
That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Or any of the carnivals in those horror movies I saw as a kid.
Good Lord. So all right, so you make the decision to like, okay, I'm gonna go be a writer, and as insane as that is, I'm assuming it didn't just you wrote your first script and all of a sudden the door swung open, the money just started tossing at you, all the opportunities were in. I'm assuming there was a time period where you were trying to hone the craft, getting slapped around by the town.
Yeah.
So how long was that? How long was that window?
That window was about, I guess 10 years. In the sense, I started getting work basically after about 4.5 years, I started getting enough work to not have to, I still kept my day job, but I didn't.
Smart.
Because you never know. You're working from one to another, but I was thinking, wow, I'm saving some money. I seem to be getting steady work. Nothing's getting made, but I'm getting paid to write. So, okay, optioning some scripts, selling a script or two. And then, so that was about 4.5 years. And then another 5 years of, a couple of TV things getting made for television, but they bore no resemblance to what I'd written, that kind of thing. So
the Gladiator wasn't your original vision, sir?
I don't think so. Yeah, no.
So I've heard stories of, and for the youngins listening, there was these things called TV movies of the week.
That's
back
right.
in the 80s and early 90s, which was a really fertile ground for a lot of filmmakers, because that was where they got their foot in to show people Spielberg got Duel as a TV movie of the week.
Still, it's a great movie, and
it's amazing. So during that time, what did you do to keep going? Because there was no indication, at least, that you were going to be able to make a go of this.
It's really hard because there is no bottom rung of the ladder where you go, oh, I'm on, and now I'm on my way. You're always jumping for it until you're suddenly, as they say, you can't make a living in this business, you can only make a killing. And that's kind of true. There's just no in between, particularly back in the old studio days. There were indies getting made, and I think my world opened up a little bit when John Carpenter made Halloween, again, because I was writing, low budget horror films at first. That was my, what I'd grown up with. And so people were suddenly, and maybe even before that, were buying, indies were horror films. So.
Yeah. When Easy Rider was a kind of thing. And but that was the 70s and 80s. But I think it was when John actually that was the first really, truly like full blown indie.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. It didn't have Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda in it. Like it was.
Right. Yeah. No.
But it was still not what it wasn't in the 90s. The 90s is when the independent movement as we know it really exploded.
Yeah.
So how do you go from the Gladiator TV movie of the week to Dead Poets Society? How did you write? Like, how did you come up with it? How did you get it out there? It doesn't seem, I know, like in today's world, you put out Dead Poets Society, it's gonna be a tough sell because of it's a drama and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But in those times, late 80s, early 90s, they were still making films like that. So I guess it was a little bit more open to that. But that's still not a slam dunk by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all. I mean, interesting because I think it just tells about the times. Dead Poets opened with the first Batman with
That's right. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, and little do we know at that point, and Batman did really well, but little did we know that was going to be the trend that started to, take Hollywood away. But yeah, no, it was a very hard. I mean, at first I can't really remember why I decided to write it. I'd been being paid to work, not getting movies made, and I think a lot of the stuff I was writing were just things I thought would sell, and
You never
they
do
sort
that.
of did, but I don't think I was that good at that stuff. And then just I had been telling this story about the basic Dead Poet story to a girlfriend for a while, and she was going, God, that sounds so good. You got to write that. She and I broke up. I got married. My wife saying the same thing. And I finally just said, okay, I've got a couple of months here. I'm going to just sit down, clear the room out and do it. And I did, and my agent at the time read it, called me up at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, this is the best script I've ever read. Let's talk in the morning. I'm okay, great. And
Awesome.
I went into his office that day and he said, I've been thinking about this. It's a great script, but I will not be able to sell it. And, if you want to get this made, if you want it to be any more than a writing sample, I hate to say you're going to have to get another agent. And I said, well, I understand all the deficits of this script, but yeah. So I left and I think took 5 agents before I got another agent to say yes. And that agent said, I've only read half of it, but there's some clients here in our company that, actors that I think might be good for it, some young people. And I remember thinking, boy, what if he ever reads the second half and drops the project,
Yeah.
But yeah.
That ending was a bit, it was an interesting ending to say the least.
Yeah. So, and then Stephen Haft, who had read the script just maybe a month after I got that new agent, and a year and a half later called him back and said, I just can't get that script out of my mind. I want to option it. I think I've got some connections that might be interesting. Little did he know, every studio had passed. I mean, it was just, as dead could be.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the people at Disney, and it was Touchstone at Disney that eventually bought it. I did get a meeting there and they said, it's a strong story, but poetry, Dead Poets Society, the 3, any one of those words in a title is death, but this is all in the same one. And they said, why don't you make it about, make him a dance teacher?
Right.
Because of course what had just come out, but
Dirty Dancing.
Yeah. So like, nah, I don't think so. Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then out of nowhere, maybe 3 years after I wrote it, Stephen Haft gave it to Jeff Katzenberg, who read it and bought it immediately. And, we had a meeting 2 days later and he said, we're making this movie. Let's cast it and go. So
my God. So it was Jeff Katzenberg who got it and took off with it. And then Robin and Peter Weir.
I know. It's funny. I had seen Witness the day I finished the script. My wife and I went out to Witness, and I just said, God, if I could get him, and she said, well, send him the script. So when I polished it up and so forth, I did. And of course they passed. That was that. I didn't, so that, a couple of years later to get him was amazing.
That's so interesting for a script of a film that was so well received, obviously, and a script that eventually won the Oscar. I love hearing these stories that it was not this. The town knows nothing. William Goldman said, "The town knows nothing. It takes one person with just a slight bit of vision, and a little bit of cojones, to roll the dice, and obviously some power.
Yeah." I mean, it's a Me Too situation. Somebody always told me you can learn everything you need to know about executives by watching 2-3-year-olds in a sandbox. If there's an object that's like an old bucket that's sitting in the corner, if nobody it'll sit there for weeks. But as soon as one kid gets it, they all start fighting over it, right? And at that age, kids their necks won't go like this. So the answer to everything is no. So, that's the executive mindset. Easier to say no. Yeah.
That's actually a brilliant, I've never heard that one before. That's actually brilliant and very, very true. you get you get Robin Williams, who at that point Robin was Robin. I mean, he was still Robin Williams. He wasn't Oscar-winning Robin Williams. That was a few years away, but he was still Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And by the way, that title, Dead Poet Society, only title worse than that Shawshank Redemption. Only title worse than Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
But when Robin
he stunk, So what do you?
And that movie, who's even heard of that movie?
Right. Exactly.
So when you, what is it like working with Robin and Peter? Were you on the set? How would that whole? I mean, you must be. Again, coming from TV movies of the week that was the first big one, right? That was the first.
Oh yeah. I had sold, strangely enough, on the same day that Katzenberg bought Dead Poets, I sold another script, a thing called Love at Second Sight, to Lorimar, and then Warner Brothers took it over. But that just turned out to be a disaster. It was being made basically at the same time. In fact, they finished that first, and my parents had come to visit, and we went to see the finished version of that movie. And my dad, it was like middle of the day, and my dad afterwards said to me, "You've got to find something else to do for a living," And then,
that's rough.
I know. But then we went over to Disney and looked at. I got them to screen a few dailies for my parents of Dead Poets, and Dad said, "Well, maybe you got a chance after all. We'll see." But it was. I don't know. I kind of, all I was concerned about at the time was that they're going to make what I wrote, so it was, I wasn't playing defense by any means, but I was in there sort of fighting for my, and didn't really have to, because those, we all had the same basic vision of the movie. So it was amazing. And Peter Weir, I mean, it's funny because his first question to me was, why aren't you directing this? I can sort of feel from the way you write it that's what you want. And I said, Peter, first of all,
no one's given me that.
If I were directing it, I would just step aside for you, number one. But two, are you crazy? This thing is barely getting made, And he goes, yeah, I understand that. And then he said, well, I would like you on the set. And, if it gets boring, if that's, I'll understand. But, since you want to direct, he said, I've made 8 movies. I'm happy to sort of help any way I can. He was so generous, So
you shadowed Peter Weir, essentially.
The whole time, yeah. And we just had, he would always say to me, just feel free to, the first day he said, just anything you're thinking, feel free to just talk to me about it after a take, And after about 2 takes, as soon as it was over, I'd walk up to him and go, well, what if it? And he said to me, you know what, just count to 10 before you talk, and then say it to me. And I said, you know what, I'll just go home. And he said, no, don't get offended. Just please give me a chance to have my own thoughts, and then you can talk, So I said, okay. So I did that. And maybe on the 3rd or 4th take of the first shot, he said, well, why don't you go direct the shot, the scene? I said, Peter, I'm sorry, I'm talking to him. He said, no, I mean, if you have an idea, go. So I walked out and I see Robin look over at Peter, and Peter nods. It's okay. So I give Robin something to do and come back, and he does it. And Peter said, what do you think? And I said, it didn't work. And he said, I don't think it works either, but nice try. And okay, we'll try that again some other time. He was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I said, well, what if I screw this up? He goes, I'll fix it.
So much confidence in.
Oh yeah.
Comfortable. He's so comfortable in his own skin at that point that he doesn't even have an ego, not even threatened by you in any way, shape, or form. He was just so generous to you. That's wonderful.
Yeah, he was fabulous.
So I have to ask, because I've had multiple people on the show who've worked with Robin. And what is it like seeing Robin on the set? I'm assuming he riffed. He had to have riffed.
Oh yeah. Well, interestingly enough, the first he shot. I think we shot for 3 days, and then he had to go off and he was in a play on Broadway. I think he was Waiting for Godot on Broadway with Steve Martin. So he was kind of going back and forth. But the play was 2 weeks away from the end of its run. So we got him for 3 days, and then he came back, and we had him for the rest of the shoot. And the first 3 days he was so on book, so perfectly on that it was a little bit dead. And I was saying to Peter, I'm worried. And he said, I am too, but don't worry. And I said, well, what are we going to do? He said, well, we got 2 weeks to figure it out. So when he got back, it was kind of like that the first take again. We were in the classroom for the first time. And he said, Peter said, all right, I got an idea. Let's do an improv. He said, Robin, if you were just teaching these kids, what would you teach them? And he goes, oh, I might read to them, might teach them a little Shakespeare. And Peter said, we're going to roll cameras, just come in and do it. And Robin immediately came in and teach, he had no script. So he started connecting with the students in the way he's so good at as a stand-up, but also as an actor. And he realized right away, oh, this is a dialogue, even if the students aren't saying anything. So he, that improv stayed in the movie. We had that. And then, from that point on, he completely got it, felt absolutely free to do whatever he wanted. And it was great.
And I'm imagining that young cast who turned out to be a couple of heavy hitters came out of that cast.
Yeah, that's right.
They must have been, like I'm improving with Robin Williams.
Yeah, I know. They were up to it though. He was
young.
Such a kind guy, so nice to everybody. There was just never any sense that you couldn't. He was so encouraging. Why not? You just pretty soon you relaxed and you just said whatever you wanted, and that's what they did.
So what was the biggest lesson you learned from Peter watching him on that set as a director or as a storyteller in general?
Say as little as possible to the actors unless you have to, really give them a chance to do what they've brung to the party, and then intervene if they're off, but don't over direct. Don't walk up and go, okay, this is the moment where and this is what just happened and all that. See what they bring, because 99 or 89% of the time, their instincts will be right. And if you tell them, the other thing was always answer a question with a question. They'd say, well, what's happening here? And he'd go, well, what do you think? And then they would, he knew we'd talk through all this stuff, but that allowed them to own it. They'd say, well, I think this, and that puts it into the actor's body. So very simple, deceptively simple, but very effective.
Now, the one thing, and for everyone listening, this is going to be a spoiler alert. So if you have not seen, it's not our fault. It's like, 32 years old, 33 years old at this point, this movie. It's not our fault if you haven't watched it. If you want to skip this part, we're going to talk about a spoiler alert here. The ending of that film, I can't imagine it ever getting made today. Just ever. How did you, the balls of Katzenberg and Weir and yourself to put this out there in that way? Because that is such a touchy subject. Suicide is such a touchy, obviously it's a minefield to touch in, but it's perfect for that film. It is, it's necessary for that film. You can't move that. You can't end that film without it. At least being satisfied.
That's right.
How did you guys approach that? How did Peter approach it? How did Robin approach it? How did you approach it? Like, because it's such a touchy thing. And at what point did you say in the writing process, this is what's gonna have to happen in this film?
Well, when I wrote it, I was too naive, I think, to think that it was anything difficult. It was part of the story. It's where the story had to go. And that was that, And when Peter and I met and started talking through things, at one point, we kind of avoided the suicide for a while, but finally we got to, and I brought it up because I said, Peter, frankly, now after I see people's reactions and talk to people, I'm worried about this. He said, I had the chance to meet Ingmar Bergman once, and Bergman told me that the only thing you could do that would absolutely destroy a film was have the main character kill himself. And so I said, oh my God. And I said, what are we going to do? And he said, we're going to hope Bergman's wrong. And I said, okay. So that was kind of it with him. And we never had debates at the studio about it. It was
really,
yeah.
It's because Katzenberg's a filmmaker. He really was.
I'm sure they thought about it, but they never said anything to me about it because I think they saw that you couldn't have this. It just wouldn't be a good story without it. Story wouldn't work. Certainly, the ending of the movie, the very ending of the movie, wouldn't work without it. But anything short of that would have just to be kind of wimp out. I think.
Right. Exactly.
But
the soul of the script would have been gone.
Yeah. They wanted to change the title of the movie.
To be fair.
Yeah.
To be fair, Let's
They
call it
tried.
what it is. They
Yeah.
what were some other names? Do you remember?
Well, they asked the marketing department and the distribution people to all eat. They made each of them come up with 20 alternative titles to the story. So we had like this thick, piece of paper, double on both sides with just hundreds of names, and they picked Keating's Way. And I know. So on the for the first few days of the shoot, on the slate at the studio's insistence was Keating's Way. And Peter was a little bit worried about it. I remember we went to a video store, and Peter loved to, whenever somebody would recognize him and say, "What are you doing next?" He'd say, "Do you really want to know?" And they would go, "Yeah." And then he would pitch them the whole story of the movie. And because he loved to tell the story, that was his way of, really getting into it. And I remember one guy said, "Robin Williams, and that was not a comedy, is it?" And it kind of chilled Peter a little bit because he realized people are going to come expecting Robin to be in a comedy, which this wasn't. But it just sounded, so he said, "I'm a little bit worried about the title." But after about 3 or 4 days of seeing that on the slate, he called me and said, we're going with Dead Poets Society. To hell with Keating's Way. I've told the studio that's the title, and just that's it. And I said, "Well, what are they going to do?" He said, "Well, they're going to take it or they're going to fire me." So I said, "Okay." So
wow, that was
that. Yeah,
geez,
yeah.
That's Keating's Way, for God's sake.
I know. That was a TV movie title, right? I mean, that
was a TV movie. But Robin, was that Robin's first dramatic, like deeply dramatic role?
Bizarrely, he had made a movie about 2 years before for PBS in black and white called Seize the Day.
No.
About it. And when I heard that, I mean, not having anything, knowing that Robin would ever even be, a possibility for the movie, I went, "Oh my God, somebody's made a movie called Seize the Day. I bet it's exactly like this." But I it's always my paranoia. And because, you just sort of assume that once an idea hits you, it's hitting 40 other people at the same time. That guy works that way. But anyway, it was not that. It was a very dark, very grim film about Robin plays an insurance agent who does anything but seize the day. He just lives a very small life. And so that was a very dramatic role, and kind of, Walking Dead, I hate to say it. And I mean, maybe I should see it again, but no, he had done, I guess, GARP. He had done
World Corner of the GARP and stuff, but none of those are hits, and it was still pre-Good Will Hunting. So, this was the first time they showed his chops. But by the way, before we did this interview, I went back to watch that trailer just to kind of like remind me of having seen the movie in a while. And the first 60 seconds it's set up almost as a comedy.
Yeah,
like it's set up as a comedy, and like when I'm watching it, I'm like, my God, they're setting this up as a. I mean, they kind of get a little bit more serious at the end, but it's really an uplifting trailer.
I know. Well, then the marketing department does what it does, right? They just
exactly. So, all right. So the movie comes out. It's a hit. It's definitely a hit in the video stores for sure, because I was working at the video stores when that came out in the 1990s. I was in high school. So I remember recommending that film constantly to people, and then people coming back like, "You did tell me about the ending," but it was beautiful. So you right. Go and it gets nominated. You win an Oscar. And now you're kind of, you've hit the dream for all screenwriters, pretty much. Mm-hmm. You've won an Oscar. How does the town treat you? How do you deal with it? Because I've had other Oscar winners on the show. It varies on how the accolades, how the town treats you, all of that stuff. How did you handle it, and what was it like? I mean, I by the time the Oscars came around, I had already had 2 fairly, hit movies in the theaters. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Dead Poets both came out within a couple of weeks of each other. Right.
They both did really good business. So, I was getting lots of offers and stuff. That just put it up to another level. And then it's hard because people start saying, I'm not going to give you notes. And you kind of go, what does that mean? I just don't, I would never want to tell an Oscar winner, what to write. And you kind of go, you know what? I'm no better now than I was when I wrote this. And, I need input. I need feedback. I need your honest feedback, or, that's just, you thrive on that. It's not always pleasant, but that's what you do. So it was hard that way. And, also just to be deluged with so many offers. Literally, if I had been diligent about it, more diligent about it, which I should have been, I would have been reading, a script or two a night for a couple of years.
Because they wanted you to direct, not just write,
write and direct. But I put it out.
Whatever,
whatever you want to do. Well, really, it's crazy. And so I don't know that I handled it well, because I still really wanted to. I had my own ideas of things I wanted to do, so I kind of kept putting those offers aside in a way. And, looking back, I turned down some really good things. And it was, you just go,
some
wow.
big shows that would have
big hits. And, to their credit, a lot of times, I would read the book that was offered, and I did not see what the movie that they made in that book, so some very excellent people got a hold of it with a better, grander vision than mine. But still, it was hard. And it just, you kind of go from your own house, getting the mail and taking care of your family, to this thing where you could literally eat lunch and dinner on somebody else for 5 years. Honestly, it just never stops. People want to take you out,
It's the golden ticket in many ways, but just like lottery winners, some people deal with it differently. Some people, it destroys them.
Right.
Some people don't take advantage of the situation when it's presented to themselves. And there's no book on it. There are some more interviews like this out there where I ask these kind of questions of Oscar winners. I'm like, dude, how did you deal with this?
Right.
But it's a small club, the Oscar winning screenwriters.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, for me, it was the luck of it is that the 5 or 10 years of working, basically in my basement, alone doing it, prepared me, because I had written a lot. So, I felt I'm never confident, but I felt pretty good that I could, about delivering what, if I got a job and liked a project, that I could give them something that, at least they wouldn't hate me.
After you won the Oscars, I've always fascinated about this. You still were insecure as a writer?
Oh yeah. But the expectations go up, right? Now you're an Oscar winner. They expect everything you turn in has got to be genius, because
you're an Oscar winner.
Yeah, at least I felt that. But it didn't take long to shake that. Mainly, fortunately for me, the day after the Oscars, I had to get up on a plane and go and have some meetings with Bill Murray over What About Bob. So it was just immediately back to work. What About Bob was kind of,
that was a pretty big hit as well, if I remember.
Yeah. It wasn't, I can't remember, but it did well. And, but I had that work to do. So I didn't have,
you didn't get a chance to overthink things. You were just,
not really.
You were working.
Yeah.
And so with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, again, were you brought in on that? Was that an original idea, or you were brought in?
No, I was brought in. I mean, I would say 10 days before the anticipated start of production, before the first day of production, they fired the entire group. They fired the writers, they fired the director, they fired the producers. I think I'd heard that Rick Moranis had balked, that he had been sold that it was a comedy. It wasn't a comedy. And my agent called me and said, "You're starting this rewrite tomorrow, and you've got 8 days to turn it into a comedy." And I'm like, what are you talking about? So he sent it to me. I said, I can't even get through this. It's a drama. What are you talking about? I've already committed. You're doing it. There's a meeting tomorrow at 8:00. Be there. I'm like, oh my God. So that was like a Wednesday. And I went to the studio and I said, you know what? I got to think about this. I can't just start writing. I got to have a take on it. They said, no. You don't understand. A week from Saturday, this is going in a pouch to Rick Moranis. He's reading it on Sunday. If he's doing it, he's going to be in Mexico on Tuesday, starting the shoot. If he reads it and doesn't like it, we're scuttling it. I'm like, oh my God. And then they said, so start tomorrow. I said, no, I'm going to start on Monday. I'm going to think about it for 3 or 4 days. And they just, every 2 hours, Katzenberg would call me and go, you ready to start? Come on, start. Just start writing. Just put some words down. That's all you got to do. And I'm like, no, I'm Yeah.
But I remember when that movie came out. Again, this is prime video store time. During when that movie came out, and oh my God, that was a monster hit. If I remember, it did a lot of business theatrically. It destroyed in the video store, spawned a sequel, spawned a ride or a show at Disney World.
Yeah, ride and a series too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, it was, but it was the idea of the previous team. That was, all credit.
I mean, it's genius. It's a fairly genius idea.
Yeah. So, so that part is, but yeah, it was a surprise hit. I mean, it actually was released along with Batman, against Batman.
I remember that. Actually, I remember that weekend. I was like, what's this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? Genius, but the concept is fairly genius, especially for the time period that it came out in.
Yeah,
it just was perfect for that time. But I mean, you go back and you look at that movie, you're like, the visual effects just weren't ready yet.
I know. At the time they worked, but
Right.
I mean, I can remember, because I always saw those Flash Gordon, Saturday morning Flash Gordon things they made in the 30s. And you kind of wonder, will Star Wars ever look like that? And it kind of did after a while, a little bit.
Until he polished it up a bit.
Yeah. But when you first see it, it's so amazing. It feels like that is as real as it's ever going to get. And it's perfect. So
it didn't bother the box office. Let's just put it that way.
No.
When it came out.
The sort of fake grass and weeds in Honey didn't either. But
the ant head and
yeah. So
it was like, it reminded me of that movie in the 50s. Was it Them? Is it called Them?
Right.
The giant ant movie.
Yeah. I think that what had happened was that the previous team had told Disney they wanted to do all the special effects kind of analog, old style, that the bee would be a man in a bee suit, that kind of thing. So Disney had them shoot a test. They saw it and they just said, goodbye. That's it. We're not doing it that way. We're getting other people. So they got Joe Johnston, who was a model maker at ILM. And, that's.
They called Joe. I remember, I think I saw that in the ILM documentary or something on Disney Plus. He was like, and then they called me for this Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie, and they just needed someone who could do some effects. So I got the job.
Right.
And it was George. It was George Lucas who gave him the attaboy, like, the Donnie Brasco, he could do it.
Yeah, I think Jeffrey called George and said, "Who you got?" And George said, "I got this. He's a model maker, but he's brilliant and he can do it." And Jeff said, "Okay." So
those things don't happen today. Like unless it's a Steven or someone from the old guard making those calls. But I think once that generation is gone, the new generation, there's just nobody that has that kind of juice anymore or has that power to even do that. No one at Disney, other than maybe Iger, could do that.
Eisner was part of that. I mean,
Eisner too, of course.
The first, I had made it because I'd gotten sick every time I went to Mexico. I made it because they said, you're going to be on the set. And I said, nope, not going to Mexico to be on the set of this movie. That I'll watch dailies here. Not going to cry. No. So they said, at that point, I had them because we were deep into a 7-day, process. But the first day the dailies came back, I was there and something happened. And Jeffrey looked at me and said, "Did you write that?" Little kid said something. He said, "Did you write that line? I don't remember that in the script." I said, "No, but I like it." And they stopped the dailies and they said, "Get Joe Johnston on the phone." So they got him on the phone. I remember David Hoberman, who was head of production, was talking to him, and he was saying, we're not going to improvise. We've worked really hard on this script. And then he hung up. And Eisner said, "What happened?" And he said, "He hung up on me." And I was like, uh-oh. So Eisenberg goes, "What do we do?" And Katzenberg said, "Well, we can fire him, or we could make his life miserable, or we could go along and see what happens." And Eisner said, "What do you want to do?" And Katzenberg said, "Well, let's go along, see what happens." And, that was the moment. Joe's career was on the line. I don't think he ever knew it, but he did a great job. So
that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, by the way, do you outline when you work?
extensively. I mean, I take notes for months or however long I have, and then to the point where I'll have 150 pages of just notes. Sometimes I've written the same scene twice and don't even remember it, and then I go through and I organize them. I make sure there's space between them. I print them out. I slice every idea and paragraph or whatever or scene into a separate thing. I put them in a pile. I pick it up and I go, oh, this is Act 2 somewhere, and I leave the floor open. So I lay the whole thing out along the floor. And there, at the point that I start, there are places where I don't know how I'm going to connect scenes. I might not even know how this whole section is going to work. But while I'm figuring out what's going on with all the other stuff, those little aha connection moments happen. So it's a really good process, and I just stumbled on it.
Do you when you're writing, are you trying to tap into the ether? Are you trying to do that thing that kind of flows through you, or not? Because no, you're just what?
No, I'm just into the story, completely into the story and characters.
They're the ones driving it, so you're not trying to waiting for inspiration or the muse to show up.
No, they are the muse, and it'll show up if you work with them. If you're just there. The ether to me is a kind of place of self-criticism, of thinking, oh my God, nobody's ever going to make this.
Okay.
You just read that somebody just sold a horror film for a script for $15 million. Anybody going to buy this piece of crap? This thing I'm working on, no chance. All those things come in, you got to leave them out. So just stay with your story, get through the first draft. Maybe at the end, you'll just go, this was a bad idea. You've wasted a couple months, whatever, but probably not.
Something comes out of it. You're a better writer. Something. You're a better writer.
You're better. Absolutely.
Now, how do you deal with studio notes?
I kind of figured that the people giving the notes had the same pride of authorship that I have. So, their job to give notes, right? So I want to encourage them to give good notes. And I do the same thing to them that they do to me, which is if they're good, they'll always start by going, wow, we love what you did, da, 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 da. Of course, they're going to shred it and eviscerate it. But by telling me how much they love it and giving me all that support, I'm open. And I do the same thing to them when they're giving me the notes. I go, oh, that's interesting, really good, huh? I write everyone down as if I love it. And they feel very good about my response. And then when I come back and go, yeah, I love this note, I love that one, but this thing, I'd like to do it, but it doesn't work because of this, they listen because they know I'm on their side. If I'm defensive in the room, which I did when I was early going, they're just like, uh-oh, we got a defensive writer, and they're not going to listen to anything you say. But if you're open, you form a great relationship, and then they go, yeah, you're right. That would ruin the whole rest of the movie if you did that. So
you don't drop, because I've heard some writers do this, is that they'll put something in so ridiculous just to give them some meat. You don't do that.
No, I never do anything that I think would be anything.
Because it possibly might get stuck in there if you're not too careful.
Absolutely. Don't ever write anything you don't want shot, and
did you ever hear the story of what Good Will Hunting what they did with the script?
No.
In the middle of the script, they put this massive orgy sex scene with Will Hunting and his friends, and there's this giant thing, and I forgot who it was. I think it was either Chris Moore, or I think Chris Moore told me this story on the show, and it's like he gave it to the studio, which was, I think that was Touchstone as well. It was a Touchstone or Hollywood, one of those Disney arms, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Or Miramax. It was a Miramax film at the time.
Yeah. Right.
And then I think it was somebody who read it, and they're like, we love the movie, but that orgy scene in the middle seems a little out of place. And they go, we want to make sure that you read the entire thing. So we stuck that entire scene in there.
Funny.
And that's how we know if you actually read it or if you didn't read it. Because if you read it, you're going to say something.
That's great. That's so smart. Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing to me is most people, and I'm guilty of this myself, when they hit something that really bumps them and bumps them badly, they don't read anything after that, really. They think they have. They will finish the script. But, you get in a meeting and, they'll go, boy, that thing, they'll start and you can tell something's really wrong. That thing on page 20, what did you do? You fix that, And you come back and they go, and God, all that stuff you fixed in the second half of the script, it's amazing. How did you do that in just a day? And, it's been there all along. They just couldn't
Right.
process it. Yeah. So it's interesting that way.
Sometimes I've heard, even I've done this on a couple of jobs where I'll just write the same. I'll just send it to them again after the notes,
Yeah.
and they'll go, "Oh, it's so much better this time." I'm
That's
like, I think that's great. I'm grabbing your notes are fantastic. Now, is there anything you wish somebody would have told you at the beginning of your career?
Wow.
A little nugget of something you're like, man, when you win the Oscar. Well, besides that.
People told me so many things. I got a lot of good advice. Most of the advice was, if you can do anything else with your life, get out, because no matter how talented you are, this film is going to eat you alive. And people told me that, but I was too stubborn and, to listen. That's not going to happen to me,
Never me.
It happened to everybody else, that ever picked up a pencil. But I don't know. People have told me, just only fight the important fights. Don't, and I don't agree with that. I actually think you do better. I've had people say, why don't, come on, can't we just do that? And it's like, no, why would I agree to do something? And why would you want to do something that's not right for the movie? Every little detail. We have no idea what's going to bump this audience and throw them out. So let's not make any mistakes if we can help it. We're going to make plenty, but let's not consciously do something that we think is just okay. No, I think I can't think of anything. Maybe I'm just, yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, tell me about your new film, Double Down South, which you wrote and directed. I was telling you, I saw the trailer and it's so refreshing to see. The trailer is great. It's well put together, shot gorgeously, but I'm really intrigued by the story because I've never seen a film about Kino and in the South, which is like this unique, normally it's in a big city like Color of Money or something like that, hustling bars. But tell me about that film.
I grew up, as I told you, in Nashville, and as part of a misspent youth, would go to this pool hall called 20th Century Pool Hall, which was dive in a fairly shabby part of Nashville. And three guys named Nick ran it. They were
Nick,
old Nick, middle Nick, and young Nick. Young Nick in that play was about 30, I guess. Old Nick was this just crotchety old guy. Middle Nick was a genuinely mean person, and you'd never want to, you ask him one question, you never talk to him again. He was so dismissive. And I was, he hated kids there, but he let us come in because, we spent money on, and in the corner, they had this game called Kino Pool, which was this board you put on the table. There are holes in the board, there are numbers for the balls, and there's this double hole. And if you make a double, you get to shoot again, and the bet doubles. So if you and I are playing for $5 and we both put $5 on the table and I make a double on the break, you now owe me $10 and I get to shoot again, and the bet's now $10. And if I hit the double hole again on the break, you owe me $20. So people that are good at doubling up, and the first time I played, I made the mistake of not quite understanding that, and almost lost my watch and never got to shoot, because if you shoot and miss, it's the other guy's shot and he gets to keep going until he misses. So it's a diabolical gambling game. And there was this really good looking woman. I have no idea how old she is, but I was 14. She would come into this place every now and then and would be back there with the guys playing Keno. And we'd sit back there, my friends and I, just gawking at her, and she never gave, even glanced at us, but it stuck with me because it was a rough crowd, and I never saw her smile. She was a tough hombre, and so she was kind of for years, I thought I want to make a story. I want to write a story about this, but it just kind of went away. I couldn't figure it out. And then maybe, I don't know, a little over a year ago, I just went, oh my God, I know what that is supposed to be, because I had a friend whose brother ran a poker game in a county near outside of Nashville. And it was kind of he was really smart about it because it was illegal, but he paid off the cops, and he would bring star poker players from all over the United States in, advertise them, kind of underground, and poker players from all over would show up to see if they could beat these guys, and he took a cut of the pot. That's all he did, just cut the pot.
Smart.
And yeah. So those two things were sort of the inspiration for this plantation house where this game of Keno is played, is a kind of, high stakes Keno.
I'm dying to see it. I can't wait to see it. Like I said, it looked really cool. It's like, it's an original idea. I just haven't seen that before. And that's such a rarity in today's world, that because everything has been made. Every story has been done, but this is just a unique placement for it. So, so this is, I think this is an independent film at this point, right?
It is. Yeah.
So how'd you get the cash? How'd you get this thing off the ground, man? Because it's not easy nowadays.
My friend Rick Wallace, we've been friends since the late 70s, television director, worked for Bochco for years, ran some of Bochco's shows. Great guy, just dear old friend. Read the script, and he's moved near outside of Seattle. And he said, there's a whole group of people up here that every now I meet them, and now and again they say, if you've got any movie ideas or whatever, we've invested in some low budget horror films, blah, blah, blah. And I said, sure, give them the script. And you know what? They just came through. It couldn't have been any easier. The budget's very low. So, and they were just like, the day the money was supposed to be there, it was there.
What? What?
I know. I mean,
you mean the money dropped on the day it was supposed to drop?
Day. Everything was just, as easy as could be that way, and we still had to go off in the middle of COVID and make the movie in 22 days. But we did.
Everyone listening, this is not the way things happen.
Never.
The money never is there, ever.
Never comes. Yeah.
It's always like, tomorrow. But we have to pay people. Well, we'll just start shooting now, and we'll pay you we'll get it to you on Friday.
Right.
I'm like,
that's
so
right.
that it's just, unless you're studio based, that's just the way it goes.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a shock, and I just hope they get their money back. So,
but it looks great. I really am looking forward to see it. And it comes out in May, you said.
Yes, it's going to be released in a minimum of 10 cities. In theaters in May, and then right after that it'll be on all the digital platforms, and then after that it's streaming somewhere.
It'll find a home somewhere.
Yeah, a final resting place.
So let me ask you, as directors, there's always that one day on set that you feel the entire world's coming crashing down around you. And it's generally every day, but there's that one day, unless you're Peter Weir, and then you're just a cool cucumber. But for the rest of us mortals, what was that day for you, either on this project or any of the other projects you worked on, and how did you overcome it?
Well, that day for me was probably about 15 days into the shoot, maybe a little less, maybe 12 to halfway through. I was shooting a scene that's it's basically the end of Act 2. And, it had been there and seemed good for, the however many months it had been, 8 months since I'd written it, and hundreds of eyes had seen it. I shot the scene. It felt good. Woke up at 2:00 in the morning and went, oh my God, that scene, the movie does not work from that point on. I've made a huge mistake. And the character that's talking about this would not be concerned about what he's talking about. The whole movie falls apart at this point. And it's like, oh my God. And I just thought, I can't save this. It's done. I'm going to have to go in and to call the investor. I mean, we're screwed. So, and then I thought, okay, you're a writer, just put on the tee and see what, think this through. And by 5 a.m, because I had to be on the set, I had to leave at 5:30 for the set, I had figured out how to rewrite the scene, and the movie not only was going to work better because of the way the scene was going to be. And I went to the set and I said, we got to reshoot that scene from yesterday. No, we don't have time. Why would you do it? It was a great scene. We all love it. I said, listen to me. And I told them what was wrong with the scene. They're like, oh my God, you're right. And here's how we fix it. Oh my God. Okay, great, great. We'll figure out how to reschedule it. And we did. So it was, but that was a terrifying day. Oh my God. It was.
It is. There's always that day. I mean, it's, filmmaking. We're insane. This is an insane proposition.
It really is.
It's art at a level, because you could be an artist, be a writer, and just write, and that's fine. There's stakes, but they're not that big in the sense that, like, it's you and your time. You could be a painter, you could be a musician. They're very solitary. But when you're working as a director,
and
you've got millions of dollars and people's careers, and every second that is going by, all you hear is cha-ching, cha-ching.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just, it is so crazy to be spending money at the rate we spend it normally in the way we do. It's always baffling to me. I mean, we rehearsed before this movie. We had a couple of readings before Dead Poets Night. Most people never rehearse. And then it's like, what? You don't ever even have a read through of the script? I mean, come on, you gotta at least, I mean, every one of those exercises gives you a big, clear picture, or a clearer picture of what's working and what's not. And yet people just, and by the way, most stuff works. It's not like it's
insane.
Yeah. So, but to me, the process is, it's baffling, but that's the way we do it. So that's what we did.
Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all my guests. What advice would you give a screenwriter or filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Well, today it's easier in a way, because you can go out with your cell phone and your friends and you can make something. You can write it, you can direct it, and then shoot it, and you can, and it won't cost much. So that's what I would do. That's what I would advise anybody to do. And if you don't want to direct, find somebody who likes your script, and somebody your age preferably, who will listen, and and make your stuff, because there's huge opportunity out there now. You can get your stuff. I mean, agents won't read anything anymore. It's hard to get them to watch. If you're going to make something, even if you make a short, you need to make the trailer for the short. They'll watch a 30-second trailer. They will not watch your 8-minute short. So
amazing, isn't it?
Isn't it? I know. So, we made the trailer. The part of the deal was, you're going to make a trailer for the movie just to sell it, because the sales agents do not want to watch your movie. They'll watch if you tease them with the trailer and they like the trailer, then they'll watch the movie. Call them up and say, you've got a movie. They'll go, okay, we'll see it. And, 2 months later, it's like, yeah, we'll get to it. Show them the good trailer. They'll watch it the movie that night. I mean, short attention spans are something we just all have to deal with now. So, make sure you cater to that.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Trust my instincts. I did it when writing, when I'm sitting down, I'm alone, and I just try whatever. I don't spend a lot of time, questioning my own instincts. If I think this is a bad scene, it is, and I just redo it. Or if I feel like something's wrong, I fix it. I don't ask myself, should I fix this? I just do it. But when I get with people as a director, and, and in meetings, I'm less likely to sort of just lay out who I am. And that's a mistake. You got to get comfortable just sometimes being the dumbest person in the room, or like Tom Hanks in Big going, I don't get it, and even if everybody's going, what do you mean you don't get it? Come on, you did it, you're going, you just you got to be completely honest with people. And if you are, after 2 or 3 movies getting made, and I just somehow I got more, or let's say less likely to be, to rock the boat a little bit, just in some ways less confrontational than I had been before. Disney, when I started there, had a reputation of being a writer killing studio. The writers would just complain, oh my God, I wrote for a month and, summarily fired, and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really know that. So I just spoke up whenever I thought I just was just like, I don't think that works. And then the people would look and you'd talk and then, okay, all right, well, what do you got? What would work? Well, that we had a real dialogue all the time. I was less likely to do that at other places. And I frankly don't know why, but it was a mistake because you have to fight the fight. Maybe I was aware that the other places had shorter fuses, and I had come to trust that Katzenberg wasn't going to fire me no matter how obnoxious. We had some shouting matches, big ones, and in front of other people, we just trigger each other like that. And he never, most of the time he would cave. If you fight hard enough, he will cave, or that's at least we would back then. But I don't know. I pulled back from that, and I don't think it helped the movies that I had made later.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And that's the opposite. Most people will tell you, try to please, but I don't think that's the answer.
What are 3 screenplays that every screenwriter should read?
Well, for sure, Casablanca, for sure, Chinatown. And I think Groundhog Day,
it's one of the most brilliant scripts ever written.
Yeah.
And I've said it so many times. It's the most spiritual film I've ever seen.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It is. It's literally the most. It's the journey of a soul reincarnating really again and again until he gets it right, and he learns his lessons along the way, and at the end he is liberated. I mean, it's literally that. Yeah,
it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's brilliant. It's incredible. So yeah.
And then, what are 3 films? 3 of your favorite films of all time?
3 of my favorite films. Well, God, that's so hard.
Today,
if I had, I guess the 2 Godfathers.
That counts as one.
Okay, that counts as one. Probably Ikaru. You ever seen that?
Oh, Ikaru, of course. Yeah, I love that film.
Yeah.
Oh, and, wrenching.
I guess Casablanca. I would have to say
it's beautiful.
The message of that movie is just one of the most, it's humanity's best moment. I think that what happens in that movie. So,
Tom, it has been a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much again for all those amazing filmmaking moments you gave me coming up, and I'm dying to see your latest movie when it comes out. But I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you again for all the knowledge and the wonderful stories. I appreciate you.
Okay. It's a real pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.